Hello and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers. Hello, empaths. We hope your week is off to a great start. As I am sitting here recording this with Denise, we have Tropical Storm Debbie passing overhead, but luckily we're safe and sound and relatively dry. How are you doing?
I'm okay. We're waiting for Debbie to make her grand appearance this coming weekend.
Have you
So
seen all the
she's,
memes online of the Debbie cakes on the
no,
ocean?
I haven't.
It's been pretty funny. But if any of you are impacted by it, we hope that you are safe and dry and have power as well. I've got
Yes.
my candles and lanterns out just in case. So let's tell everyone what we're talking about today. I'm excited to dive into this topic.
Well, this has been a roundabout way to get to this topic is I was doing a mediumship reading, probably, I don't know, a year or so ago, and I started thinking about essence versus evidence. When we're both evidential mediums, we bring through enough evidence to say, okay, yes, this person was this tall or this was their job. And then I thought, wow, I wonder if you learned more about your own genealogy, would that make you a better medium? Because then you're able to take the evidence and make it more. Our whole goal is to paint people back to life, even to for a few minutes. So if we knew more about our own people rather than just, an old sepia photograph, would it make us better mediums? And then that led to this thought of, okay, that makes sense to me. If we make them people, if we learn about them, if we connect with them and use medium techniques to do that through genealogy, that next step would be the ancestral healing of actually going back and figuring out why we carry some of the things that are limiting us or that have become patterns in our family. So it's a big old rabbit hole.
It is a big rabbit hole, but I think you have a really good point. And not only will it help mediums to paint people back to life and to uncover any blocks, like, for example, what if you do your genealogy and you discover one of your relatives may have been hindered in their life because of their intuitive ability? I mean, that can help really with a lot of healing and blocks you might have to opening up your own intuition. And you just never know what you're going to uncover. I mean, I've told listeners before, my mom was always really, really intuitive and psychic, and we all knew it, and no one really talked about it. It was just, mom's intuition, I think is what we called it. And then we found out that she had always thought she was Italian and German, and her cousin did genealogy, and it turned out that her German side wasn't German at all. They were Romanian and had to change their name at Ellis Isles because they didn't want to be accused of being gypsies. And I remember as I was like in college when we found that out, and I was like, "Oh, that's why I'm weird and different. I'm half gypsy," which I loved. I thought it was wonderful. And then when I, came out of the psychic closet and was more vocal and prominent with all of this work, my cousin on my dad's side of the family messaged me on Facebook and said, "Did you know that our Nana was psychic and everyone called her the Irish Witch of Long Island?" And I was like, "No, nobody ever told me that." So it's just amazing what you can discover when you start to unlock the door to your ancestors.
Right. I agree. And lately, when I've been working with people, I'll get a specific sign. I don't need to go into what it is. And I will strongly, strongly feel that they're the person who came in to do the heavy lifting, to break the cycle of the generational trauma, to they're the one that was airdropped in. And it seems more and more people are stepping into that role and saying, enough is enough. It ends with me. And that's another whole premise of all of this work is I strongly feel if our big goal is let's unite together in unity, we need to get this generational trauma out of the way and do the healing work that maybe the past generations didn't have the social or cultural supports in place to do.
Yeah, I really think it's almost like we've come to this time in our society as a consciousness where people are ready to do that deep inner healing. And from so many guests we've had on in the show through the years and research you and I have done just on our own, one thing we've learned is when you release trauma, when you heal a generational pattern, it echoes back. So, of course, it's going to echo into the future, which is wonderful. You're going to break a cycle for future generations. But what a lot of research is showing is that it echoes back, which I don't really understand intellectually, but on a soul level, I get.
We've done so much work with different ways you can connect with people in spirit. We've both done this a long time. And about, I don't know, a while back, I was doing a shamanic journey, which is very similar to a guided meditation. And in some respects, and I went back to when I was about, I don't know, 18 months old. I could see myself in this experience being, because I was asking about where did this block start in my life. And I saw that. And in this experience, I saw my mother and with my sister, who is 3 years older than I am. But my mother was young. My sister was, maybe 4 or 5 years old, so little. And what was really vivid in the dream was, in the experience, was the look on my mother's face. And she had this deer in the headlights look, just this overwhelmed. And I came out of the experience, and then I did a little digging around and realized that, there had been two very, very significant deaths right at that time period. There had been all of this upheaval in their life. She and my father were this young couple with two little kids trying to figure things out, but I had never, ever been able to look at it from a place of that level of empathy and compassion before. And I really, really believe that that's what we're doing with this work is where, instead of blame or why do I have to do the heavy lifting, we're able to honor our ancestors and say, you know what, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Let me see what I can do to help.
That's beautiful. And I think it's important to add that it's okay if you're not there yet. You know,
Yes.
I remember when I first read How to Heal Your Life by Louise Hay when I was in finishing up high school or going into college, right around that time. And I think the last third of her book is about her journey of seeing her parents as people and not her parents. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And how she really learned to heal any issues she had, especially with her mom towards the end of her mother's life. And I remember reading that and thinking, that sounds lovely, you know, but I'm not ready to go there just yet. And as I, grew and matured and became wiser, I reread her book and I was like, yeah, of course. Like, of course I see my parents as people, as flawed human beings as we all are. But it was a journey for me. And so I think it's important if anyone's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I'm not ready. I remember once I was doing a reading and a woman's grandmother came through and really, really was asking for forgiveness for just a lot of chaos and stress she caused the family. And the client was like, no, tell her to go away. I don't want to hear from her. No. And, I get that. Like sometimes the hurt is so big, it's okay. It's going to come in stages and ripples and waves. And just know that if you can just start with you and where you are on your healing journey and just start there. And you don't have to jump right to forgiveness. I just think that's important.
And you just made a really, really, really important point is that there is no timeline. It's similar to grief. We have no right to tell someone they should be over their grief or they need to fast forward it or it's been too long. It's a very individual, unique experience. And I think this work falls into that same category.
I do too. And all of it will support your intuition and your mediumship. I took a class, an online class with Gordon Smith several years ago. And I was so excited, because I just think he's like the best medium ever. And I think it was something like the whole topic was like the number one secret to being a great medium. And I'm such a sucker for those types of headlines. I'm like, what's the number one secret, Gordon? Please tell me. And he talked all around it and he finally got to it and it was compassion. And I kind of
Yes.
felt like, the kid in A Christmas Story when he is unraveling the code and it says drink your Ovaltine. I was like, really? Compassion? Like, but then again, as I matured and grew wise and thought about it, and really dove into my mediumship, I realized if you don't have empathy and compassion, you're not going to be a good medium. And I think a lot of what you're talking about with understanding our genealogy, our ancestral, our generational trauma is about having empathy and compassion for those who have gone before us.
Right. And if you are a practicing medium, when you start to see your ancestors, and I strongly, strongly believe in my soul that they want to help us. They want to help us right now. We can tap into their wisdom, their experiences, what they did when they lived here. They're stepping closer as the world really. We need to call in the big guns with where the world is right now, is as far as angels, ancestors, and that's in your new book coming out, is how to connect with all of these different beings, people, energies that want to help us. And so if we're able to see them as people, as parents, as siblings, as what, the more we can connect with them and think about who they were and how they lived their lives, it's going to impact and strengthen how we connect to other people's loved ones in spirit. So recently I was speaking with someone and I brought through a grandmother, and I said, why, what is it with the three girls? There's three women stepping forward, the three girls. And the person said, well, I don't know. Because I think that's another part. We have uh, missing, it's Swiss cheese. We have missing pieces to who belongs where in a family line, or it may be that you have this beautiful tree, but you didn't realize that there was a sibling that passed, or there was someone who was brought into the family who wasn't biological. So there's so many different variances, but the point was there were three sisters, and the grandmother was one of the three. So once you had that and the person up was able to validate, then you can start going for that essence with, okay, who's the oldest? What are the dynamics? Were they close in age? What role did they play? You're bringing back who they really were. And I think that's what we're supposed to do as mediums. We're not supposed to just spiel off, I have a man, he's 5'10".
Yeah, that's so true. And one thing I've learned doing mediumship as well is that spirits who are more like you in terms of an energetic connection are going to come through more easily. And I think that's why, for example, I've often had a hard time pulling through people who are like super, like, those people who take the Bible literally and kind of judge a lot of other people. I have a
Yes.
hard time bringing through those energies. But I've noticed that as I've studied my family history and other people's family history and really seen that not from, because what I do is I judge judgmental people, right?
Hmm.
So, well, then who the hell am I, right? I can't throw stones at that glass house.
Right.
And so as I've worked on really understanding, the historical aspect that developed those people into who they were when they died and crossed over, it's again given me empathy and compassion, which then has enabled me to have a stronger energetic link with them.
Oh, that's beautiful. Because that's the key. I have a great aunt or aunt, depending on where you live in the world, that I only met one time. It wasn't a close family connection. And I was thinking about her as I've been doing this work. And she was really, um, she didn't fit with her generation. That she was a nurse, she lived alone, she traveled. Her big thing was she traveled to all the world's fairs. She had this wanderlust. She did, I mean, just as, thinking about, my age and how much older this woman would have been. So I thought, why don't I connect with her more? Because in some respects, I have that same energy that I've never felt from other people in my family. So I think we can, and who were they when they were younger? Because she must have been kind of badass when she was younger, and I'd love to get to know her better.
Yeah, and I think sometimes just putting out the call for that is really helpful, but also asking questions. We've got to ask our older family members questions before it's too late.
Yes.
Even if it's just in an email or over the phone, But it's so important to ask those questions. Almost, I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm just interviewing them. Years ago, I was at a cousin's wedding and I sat down with my great aunt. Now, my mom's mom was kind of a cold woman. I love that line from a Shirley Jackson novel. She was like a cold wind to the bone. That's how I always
Ooh.
described my grandmother. And she was, she was kind of given a lot in life. She married this guy who's my grandfather's dad was a stonemason. So when they married, they were given a house. Like, how's that for a
Hmm.
wedding gift, right? He built them a house. And, she had four lovely children, and but she was just always kind of mean and upset. Now, meanwhile, her sister, my great aunt Julia, didn't have as good of a time. And I don't know what happened because, these families don't talk. But I remember sitting down and kind of interviewing her and her grown son at this wedding. And I found out that she was just like the nicest, kindest, most caring woman, even though I think she had two husbands that died. She was so, so poor most of her life. She worked as a waitress at a restaurant for 52 years.
Wow.
And it was just a completely different person from who my grandmother was. And I was like, how were you two raised in the same family? But it was really interesting. And it just made me think like, oh, so there is a lot of goodness on that side of the family that you can tap into, Samantha. It's not all cold wind to the bones over there.
Right. Right. And that's really fascinating to me because we do carry that. We have a little tiny bit. And I'm sure there are people who are adopted or have been raised by someone that's not biological family. I think that you can have those stay very similar familiar connections with people that are not necessarily sharing DNA with you.
Oh, I
They're
do too.
still family.
I do too. And you can still call on them. I was a weird little kid. I think that probably will not come as a surprise to anyone, but I was a weird little kid. I liked to play by myself a lot. And we had a creek in the house behind where we lived. And I used to go in that creek and I would just play in there for hours. I don't know what the hell I did. But I can remember this one day, I was like 8 or 9, and I loved to put my hands deep into the mud as the water just, bubbled over the rocks. And I
Hmm.
remember just having this thought and saying, I call back to me all the energy from all my family members. I mean, that's
Wow.
weird, right? For a little
For a
kid, but
little person, yeah.
for a little person, that's kind of strange. But I remember doing that, and I remember just visualizing as the water was passing through my fingers, sinking into the mud, that all the energy from my family members would come into me and give me strength. And I would imagine that if you were adopted, you could do the same thing.
Yes.
It's all energy and
Yes.
it's all intention.
Right. We look at the big historical influences that our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, oh, the potato famine, oh, World War One, or this or that. But when you start to think about them being people that were living through, where were they? Were they in a small town? Did they have to leave their country? Who were they when who were your grandparents when they were children? Who were they when they were raising your parents? And one of the things that popped out when we were getting ready for this show, you think about the social and cultural influences, but 100 years ago, just 100 years ago, on the timeline is pretty small, TV was invented. So Lindbergh in 1927, in the spirit of St. Louis, made the first transatlantic flight. Penicillin, 1928. The 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, was in 1920. Imagine what it was like to be a young person during those times, or what it was like for parents who had lost siblings or children to diseases. And then there's this magical pill or a magical shot that fights bacteria and viral infections and all these other things. That would seem pretty damn magical.
Oh yeah. And you have to think about the lens in which they were viewing the world back then. I mean, take for
Right.
example just my mom. I mean, my mom got married in, I don't know, 1963, I think, and she got pregnant right away. And she was like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this whole motherhood thing, you know? So she went to her doctor and was like, "Hey, I've heard about this new thing called the birth control pill." He would not give it to her, Denise, because she was married and she was Catholic.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? Like today, I mean, any young woman hearing that is probably like, "What? They could do that back then?" But remember, women couldn't even have a credit card in their own name until what, 1973?
Right. Right.
So yeah,
And I think it's really important to not make that a negative, but just make it indicative of the way the times were. And we
yeah.
can't blame anyone and we can't say how we can't get all riled up about it because you have to look at it, well, but look where we are now. And that's pretty damn amazing. That when you look
Yeah.
at it from an objective perspective of instead of looking over our shoulder about what's already happened, let's look at where we are right now and saying, wow, look at these amazing opportunities that women have, that people have, that people who may love someone that's not traditionally who they're supposed to love. None of that was allowed. It was illegal. That that blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind.
Me
Um,
too.
but
And something I think about a lot with just that last example is the horrible ripple effect of some of that. Like people not being able to love who they want. And think about the bitterness, the undercurrent of bitterness that that would create in your life. And then you're passing that on subconsciously to the generations.
exactly, exactly. So I think that that could be if you are in a situation where you're doing something so different than anyone else in your family ever has, and you're swimming against the current trying to figure out how am I going to do this? I don't want to let anyone down. Maybe going back to those ancestors and saying, you might find someone who completely understands exactly where you are right now, and they're going to thank you greatly for stepping more into who you really are.
Okay, let's say you identify a generational pattern, right?
Yes.
Like, let's say addiction. Let's say you've noticed that in every generation of your family, as far back as you know, there's been some addiction, whether it's drug or alcohol or something like that. How can you go about stopping that pattern?
Personally, I think that's where it comes in. The people that seem to be saying, okay, it's me, I'll do the heavy lifting. And
Right.
they're either separating from their family of origin, or they're choosing different lifestyles, or they're going in a direction that people might not understand, or those deep rooted patterns. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm delusional with this, but I think it started somewhere, and going back to figure out where it started and why someone struggled so much with that, or why there was a woman I worked with years ago. I haven't thought about this in a long time. And she and her husband were very young and they were big partiers, like huge parties. And the boys were little at that point, and her kids were a little bit younger than mine. And she would thought it was really funny that the toddler would drink at their parties and get drunk and fall down. But everybody in the family thought that was normal because that's what they all did. And I was so horrified because I thought, well, you're not doing anything to, well, see, this is judgy pie, but it felt very abusive to that baby to not be able to make the
That's not
decision whether or
judgy.
not they wanted
That's
to drink.
that's a fact. Denise, that's a
Yeah.
fact. You
Yeah. But
can't
see,
do
I
that.
think but that pattern of, um, well, everybody drinks, we all party, you start young, and it's normalized. So if you are in that and you're in a family situation where it's been so normalized, and then you're the one that steps away and says, this is really messed up, I'm not going to do it that way anymore. That's that's hard. It's beyond hard. It's probably one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to do.
But totally worth it.
Yes, 100%. Because I sole believe that it is going to help the people behind us and help the people in front of us. Because if we get into everything is frequency and vibration, and if we change our energy, we can change. And we've both done this. We'll use teaching as an example. You go in, there's tension, someone's volatile. you go into a calmer voice tone, you listen, you become proactive to help people de-escalate. That changes your energy, and your behaviors have changed the whole energy of the room. I think when we do this level of healing work, we're changing our vibration, which will, even if we don't have biological people that to hand this off to, it's still going to cause a ripple effect.
Yeah, and to me, it all comes down to two things: raw honesty and authentic communication.
Right.
I think if you can be super honest with yourself and some of the patterns and habits and traits that you've picked up and learned by observing your family patterns and recognize how those are helping or hindering you, that's a big step. And then I think if you can communicate with yourself and then those around you about those patterns, I think that's a huge significant step as well. I mean, one of the greatest things that happened to my family was when my dad joined AA. And
Mm-hmm.
he would always say, "You're only as sick as your secrets." And he would constantly talk about what it was to be an alcoholic and what it was to, he never used the word overcome that because he would always say, "I'm always an alcoholic," even though he doesn't drink. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But what it was to become sober, I guess that was the word he used. But he would talk about it constantly. And he would say, like, my greatest hope is that you girls never repeat this. And, none of us did. None of us ever had an issue with that. And I really think it's because, in large part, he was so honest about it and honest about how it repeated in his family. And the tone of how he talked about it shifted. Like when I was growing up and he would drink, we would laugh about it all the time. It was so funny in our family, like ha ha ha. Everything he did was like hilarious and funny because he was a very funny guy when he drank. But
Mhm.
I there's a part of me that didn't like the humor of that. And then when he became sober, it was just raw honesty. And he would talk about, the older family members in his line who drank and how no one ever talked about it. And so I just think if you can be super honest with yourself and your family members who are willing, ready, and able to meet you at that level of honesty, let me add that caveat, because there are going to be several family members who aren't willing, ready, and able to meet you at your level of honesty, and that's okay. Let them be. You do you.
Right.
But if you can just be honest with yourself and then communicate with yourself and look at your life and go, "Oh, I bet you that's why I chose that." Or I wonder if that's why I was drawn to this. And then rather than, again, judgy pie pants, not admonishing yourself for some of those choices you made before you were fully awake, and just recognizing and observing and noticing the pattern, to me, that's the first step in healing these generational patterns.
Oh, very, very well said. Very well said. And see, those are the ones we recognize, but sometimes, very often, ancestral trauma can show up in ways that we don't know why. We don't know where it started. It could be a physical health issue. And I'm not negating actual physical need for medicine or treatment, or that everything, there is a strong mind body connection, but maybe an autoimmune disease or chronic pain or a condition that doesn't seem to have a clear cause. There could be an ancestral trauma involved with that, that it's been passed down, passed down. And I was thinking about a pattern in my family of origin. My grandmother, my mother, my sister, and has not impacted, excuse me personally. And my sister is still in the place. So I don't want to share what that is. It's private stuff, and don't have her consent to share it, so I won't. But did they not face the emotional connection of what was involved with that physical manifestation? So I think sometimes ancestral trauma can develop into a physical health issue, or a mental health issue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you just read Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel, his whole book is talking about that everything will eventually materialize in the body if we don't first deal with it on a soul or mind level.
I think that's when it gets tricky, is when we can't, and being the parent of an adult, of two adult children, sometimes I'll see things and I'll think, ooh, is that something that happened when they were little? Should I, could I, would I? and then I can't find it. I'll ask them. They don't have it. So are some of those things they inherited in generationally and not from a specific, it was because we're so quick to say, oh, childhood trauma, check the ACEs, something's wrong. Maybe it's something that got passed down that they're choosing to, that that's why it's in their life, not because of a direct correlation with an event or a situation in this lifetime.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely think that they've done studies to show like people who have a fear of dogs, for example, and they've shown that there is it called epigenetic effect, I think, where like
Mm-hmm.
if the mother was afraid of dogs and so she's walking with her son and holding his hand and a dog comes near and she squeezes her hand and he feels her fear, then he's going to be afraid of dogs. And then when he's a grown man and he's holding his daughter's hand as they're crossing a street and a dog, and it just carries on that way, which I do think is fascinating. But another weird thought I've had several times throughout my life. So tell me if you've ever had this happen to you. Are you ever like in just, I don't know, a sad mood or a bad cycle of your life, and suddenly you get really happy out of nowhere? And okay, like for example, I remember once when I was going through my breast cancer diagnosis and I was sad and angry and upset and worried and stressed out. And I was driving to a doctor's appointment and I was thinking about all of that. And my head was just spinning. And all of a sudden, Denise, I got so happy. And I was like, where's this coming from? What am I happy about? I was trying to like trace my thoughts. Like, was I thinking about a new book that was coming in the mail later? Like, I don't know. But all of a sudden, I was filled with so much joy. And it lasted for most of the day. And I remember thinking, I wonder if like there's a me in a parallel life that's having a great day right now, or am I linking in with an ancestor right now who's like having a great day or sending me good energy? Do you ever have that happen, or am I the only one? And if I am, delete that whole last example.
No, no, I think it's a really good example because it goes back to that behaviorist. There wasn't a real catalyst for your and behaviors to shift so suddenly. It just happened. It just happened intrinsically. So I do think that there's something to that, which leads to, and we spoke about this before we started recording. So I've followed my family lineage on my mother and my father's side back hundreds of years. And it's it's interesting. It's actually quite fascinating because it just is. And to me anyway. But I've done past life regressions where, and this does connect with what you're saying, that were so clear, that were so vivid that I have absolutely no doubt that they were an experience that somehow I experienced. There is nothing in my lineage. So my example is the Old West. It was vivid. I experienced it. The whole thing, clear, clear, clear. Saw landmarks, got validations, went back and checked. No one in either side of my family has ever done that. They've never traveled. They were never there in that time period. So is there a part of us that is experiencing the multidimensional factor? Is like, as you're saying, are we fractal pieces of us in different experiences that we're going to combine all together?
I know. It's so interesting to contemplate. First of all, I'd love you to read a book that I love. I have it on my bookshelf so I can mail it to you. It's called So Much to Be Done, and it was written by one of my history teachers in college, and it's just a compilation of journal excerpts from pioneer women in the Wild Wild West and what they went through. It is riveting, and I really think you'd enjoy it. But what I had said to Denise when we were talking about this before we hit record, about 2 years ago, I went down this other rabbit hole of the binary soul doctrine, and I made Deb record an episode of it on our other podcast, Psychic Teachers, and she did not like it. I don't think our listeners liked it. I loved it, but the theory and then the doctrine traces back to ancient religions believed in this too, is that there's kind of like two of us in this body, right? There's our soul who's had all these past lives. So there's this essence of Denise, the soul of you, who sure may have lived in the wild, wild west, may have lived in the south of France in the 17th century, and on and on and on. And on and on. That soul chooses a body, the physical Denise who has all the DNA, the genetic DNA in that body. And that soul has to reconcile with the DNA in that body. And the whole goal in the binary soul doctrine, the goal of the soul in each lifetime is manyfold. But one of the goals is to kind of compromise with the DNA aspects, the genetic aspects of the physical body that they are inhabiting.
That is a huge, huge rabbit hole.
Isn't it? I know. I told you it's like I don't know, I need more IQ points to fully wrap my head around it. But what I think it means is that there could be like your soul could have had these other experiences, but there's also a part of you that has these genetic links. And so we have to explore both of them, both sides of who we are.
Right.
All
And
of
so
us.
people in our family lineage who would be coming into this experience that we're all having for the same reasons, but they may have something completely unrelated to another lifetime that we live.
Right. Exactly.
So, how do you feel that that would come in with like soul families that come in together?
Well, I think that shifts and changes. I think that there are many people in our lives that we have incarnated with before. And I think that there are just as many people in our lives that are brand new to us. But I
Yeah.
do think that with our soul family, and this is just my opinion that I've come to from doing a lot of readings and kind of getting a little peek into what is over there. I think that there are many members of our soul family who opt to stay over there on the other side to kind of watch over us. And then there are many of us in that soul family who are like, okay, are we going to do this? Yeah. You ready? Yeah. Okay. You go first. I'll be along in 3 years, you know? But I think that some of our family members, and we take turns. We
Yeah.
take turns.
I love that there's no definitive answer to any of this. We
No.
can we can feel it, we can sense it, we can think it, we can all those things, but it really there's such a subjectiveness to all of it, which makes it even more fun.
Yeah, it really does. And one of the things I point out in my book coming out in October, Heavenly Alliance, I have a whole section on working with ancestors. And one thing that I point out is that they're ready, willing, and able to help us. But because of the law of free will, we have to ask for that help. We have to seek and solicit and request that help. I remember, I think I've told this story before, so just bear with me, but this is years ago. This was like 2009 or 10. And I was doing a reading for this very young woman who did not want a mediumship reading. She wanted to know about a boy that she was dating. And this man kept appearing. And I, described him and she's like, yeah, 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 that's my uncle. And she just did not want to hear from him, which I felt was kind of rude. So I didn't want to send him away. So I said, we'll get back to Jeremy, but for now, can I just please let this man come through who's, kind of traveled through dimensions to reach you? And she was like, fine. So he showed me a house fire and was taking credit for helping them. And so it's a long involved story, but she said, yes, we did have a house fire and it was really weird how we all woke up and got out of the house. And what he told me was that when he got to the other side, he was appointed the guardian of the family. And so his job was to look out for the well-being of the family. And that just really interested me. And so what I started doing with readings from then on, I would ask for the family guardian to step forward selfishly, just because I was curious, like, what is this? What does this mean? And what I've learned is that it does not mean that we have like this guardian angel, who's like a great uncle who, died in the 1970s. It's not that. But there's someone in the family, the genealogical family, who is watching over us, meaning if we're on our soul plan, and remember, our soul plan is like a roller coaster ride at Carowinds. It's going to have ups and it's going to have downs. So the family guardian cannot protect you or prevent you from having those down times. But if something is happening that is not part of the soul plan, like a car accident out of nowhere or a house going on fire because lightning hits it, that family guardian is allowed to step in and help alleviate that catastrophic event. And I just thought that was really interesting.
I, and it makes sense. It really makes sense to me that someone would choose that role. And maybe they
Yeah.
switch off. Okay, I've been doing this for a while. Do you mind taking this for a while? These people are really out of control.
Yeah, they're driving me crazy. Yeah. And you know what's interesting too, when you and I teach our mediumship classes, especially our part two, we'll often send out a survey just to make sure people, are ready for the advanced portion. And if you read through those surveys, when we ask, like, what got you interested in this, most people will say, well, a family member died and started reaching out to me, and he or she said they'd watch over me. How many times have you read that or heard that?
Countless,
Countless. And so I
countless
wonder
times. Yeah.
if, I don't think those are necessarily family guardians, but I wonder if they're almost like a gateway, a way shower to the world of intuition. I think most mediums have that person. For me, surprise, surprise, it's not a family member. It's my friend George. But I remember George saying to me, I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to watch out for you and keep you safe. And, as a Catholic who was just afraid of everything from Ouija boards to demons to possession, I really thought if I did this work, who knows, any of those would happen to me. It made me feel safe knowing he was watching out for me. And so I just wonder if we have these family guardians that come in many different sizes, shapes, and guises that are working with us to help us fully embrace our soul plan and our spiritual path.
Right. And the ones who might be really vested in the work that we're doing. So if you're making some shifts that are taking care of or releasing generational trauma or patterns, is there someone else who wasn't able to, who is going to step forward and say, oh, hell yes, we are getting this done because I want to come back? Because that's my other thought on this is if we release all of these patterns, if we really break the cycle, does that mean the people that are in our lineage that would reincarnate into this family line don't have to face that it's done, one and done? They don't have to come back and learn it because it's been taken care of for them.
Yes, and I think that's how we heal the world, is one soul at a time.
Yes.
And so our job is not to fix the world or to heal the world. Our job is to fix ourselves. Well, I don't like that expression. Our job is to heal ourselves. And as we do that, it has beautiful ripple effects into the future. And I'm not saying don't work on being the light and sharing your light and doing your best to help others. I'm not saying that. I just mean I think if we all focused on our own inner healing and truth and authenticity, it's going to help heal the world. Because
Right.
I don't think we're going to come back and incarnate into the same family lineage. I just think it's I just think it's bigger than that, Denise. You know what I mean? Like I don't think I'm gonna I don't think I'm gonna come back into that line of I came from. But I love my family line and I want to make it a healthier, clearer way for future family members, future souls who choose that family line. And God knows, I hope who's ever in the family line that I will incarnate into next is working on their lineage too.
So people can pre-order your book, right?
Yes, they can. Yeah, and I'm actually offering some good little incentives to help people pre-order it because it really does help make or break a book success. And I'm just I don't know, I really really like this book. It feels weird to say that. I'm not being I don't know. I hate patting myself on the back, but I feel like this book came through me rather than from me. Um,
Yes.
and I really hope that it helps people as much as it helped me to write it. It's all about just, getting in touch with your spiritual abilities and co-creating a life of purpose and abundance through calling on your guides, ancestors, and angels. So to thank everyone for pre-ordering the book, I am offering some gifts. All you have to do is email me, Samantha@samanthafay.com, a proof of purchase, and you'll be entered into a drawing for an email reading with me. Plus, you'll get access to my class I'm going to be teaching at the end of September on connecting with your spiritual team of allies. And you'll receive a free copy of my Meet Your Spirit Guide meditation. And I'm working on finding time for more little pre-order goodies. So just know a lot of people have been emailing me their proofs, and I'm just saving all of your emails. And once I get everything done, I'm going to send you all the links to the free stuff, and you'll be entered into the drawing for a free email reading.
That is so generous and incredible. So not only do you get an amazing book, you get all that other fun stuff. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Thank you. Well, I just get so excited whenever people like order my book, It's like, wow, thank you. So I just want to say thank you back.
And if you are interested in this topic that we've been talking about today, I'm going to be offering a 12-week class starting in September that is a blend of genealogy, mediumship, and ancestral healing. And we're going to do a deep dive into getting to know our people in spirit, working on ancestral healing. We'll do it through mediumship, we'll do it through guided meditations, we'll do it through direct instruction of techniques. But probably the biggest part is building a community of like-minded people to share with, to get to know. And there are 6 classes. So on a biweekly basis, on a Saturday, there'll be 6 actual classes. There will be a packet sent out prior to each class or available. It will be on a site which will have all of the pre-teaching for what we're going to talk about in the upcoming class. And there's a lot of activities to really work on yourself, but also on your family line and with the support of other people. So if you're interested, you can go to my website, thegratefulmessenger.com, go to online classes, and there's a link there to sign up. If you're on my email list, I will be putting a discount code in an upcoming little quick thing. I'm not great about sending out an email, but I will send out something to give you a break financially on the cost of the course. So I'm really excited about it. It's been fun doing it on my own, but really I feel like it's part of the work that we've come together to do now moving forward.
I'm so excited too. I've seen just a sampling of some of the handouts and notes you've already put together, and it is in depth and really, really important healing work. I think that will boost anyone's mediumship, but also just enhance their connection to who they are and where they've come from.
Right. And if you're worried, well, I'm not a medium, it's not just based on being a medium. It's more on connecting more fully with yourself. So, and you and I have chatted about this, that we can connect with other people's folks and say, oh, she was one of 3. But we can bring through that stuff. But for me personally, when I connect with my own people that are in spirit, I get emotion. I get the feels. I get tear up. I know it's them because I know their energy. And part of what I'm hoping to do in this class is to blend the emotion with the technique. And really, that's where we get to grab onto that essence that we keep talking about.
Oh, I love that. Fantastic. We have so much exciting stuff coming up this fall.
We do. It'll be fun.
I know. Well, thank you guys, everyone, for listening. We hope you have a wonderful week. Please remember, as always, to show up, do great work, and share your light.
Take care.